Fine art photographer and Canon Explorer Martin Osner is on another photographic expedition, only this time a descending journey to hell.
I read about this interesting area in the Swartberg Mountains of South Africa. This place was colonized in the 1830s by a small group of settlers. The story goes that they lost their cattle while en route, and they went looking for them and found them down in this little fertile valley. I think the place was so steep and so difficult to get to that he just decided to stay.
History tells us that this farmstead was so difficult to get in and out of that it was nicknamed the Hell. In 1962, a steep gravel road just wide enough for one vehicle was constructed to gain access to the valley.
It's quite funny really, because shortly after the road was constructed, one by one these farmers left the Hell, abandoning their homes in trade for civilization.
Every photographer knows that the first and last light of the day, commonly known as the golden hours, is critical to successful landscape photography. But in this area, because of the height of the mountains and the depth of the gorge, first light only enters the valley a few hours after sunrise and then dwindles out long before sunset.
Normally with my location photography, I try to be out about an hour before daybreak, and then I stay out long after sunset to make use of the first and the last light of the day. I must admit my photography certainly takes me to interesting places, but that does not always mean that I'm guaranteed of taking interesting photographs. My expectations were so high, and I was looking so forward to visiting this area, and as I drove in, reality dawned.
Martin found that most of the area was now overgrown, and to make matters worse, the abandoned homesteads which he was hoping to find in ruin had been restored. Fantastic for history, bad news for photography.
I mean, basically, once you get down into the gorge, it's an 8-kilometer trail that finally runs dead.
Artistically, he found himself becoming frustrated with the limited opportunities.
It's no more than 1 kilometer wide, and it's completely surrounded by high mountains and large shaded slopes. It makes the place incredibly blue, with both the early light and the last light of the day. And then at midday it becomes sterile. The only really interesting place is where a river breaks through the gorge. But currently the whole area is experiencing drought, so the water level is very low, which doesn't really help.
Early one morning after going out to shoot, he once again returned empty-handed. It was only then that he realised that maybe, just maybe, it was not about what there was to be photographed.
I was reminded about the words of Edgar Degas at that stage, where he said, photographically speaking, it's not about what you see, it's more about what you choose to make others see. So in this case, I really just needed to do something different.
While enjoying an early morning cup of coffee, he spotted some interesting thorn trees in a riverbed below. The light had already started to crawl down the mountains, and he decided to take a few pictures. It was then that he was reminded of an in-camera technique using multiple exposures, which he'd used successfully a while back while photographing an abstract series entitled Rhythmus.
There are a few ways of combining exposures in photography. I mean, the one way is you can photograph the pictures individually and then blend them later in Photoshop. But this technique feels fabricated to me. When shooting in camera, the results are a lot less unpredictable.
Here he photographed 7 shots of the same scene, one on top of the other. Only this time he decided to use 3 exposures, one in focus, one out of focus, and then one photograph of texture captured on nearby rocks and walls.
Plus, if you alter the exposure slightly, or you change the order in which you shoot, you create a different result every time. A result that could never be repeated.
After a while, one of the combinations finally worked. The technique delivers a sketch-like embossed effect with texture overlay. It completely changes reality into an art impression. According to Martin, the more graphic and recognizable the subject, the better the end result.
In hindsight, yes, I could have shot these pictures anywhere else. In fact, I suppose the only thing that counts here is I decided to experiment because of the situation I found myself in.
Elliot Erwitt said, "To me, photography is an art of observation. It's about finding something interesting in an ordinary place. I found it has little to do with the things you see and everything to do with the way you see them. Driving out of the hell, Martin confesses that this place of solitude, which carries an undeserving name, a place of serenity that has very little connection to the outside world, taught him one valuable lesson. Photography is not always about the obvious. And sometimes, only when things become difficult, can other opportunities be realized.